All right, everyone, let's begin. So, Friday night, if I were you, I'd probably be partying. I'd probably be somewhere partying, but for some reason, you're here learning about the Casper test. And I don't blame you, I was in your shoes just 2 years ago and 3 years ago because I was a reapplicant. So, what is this presentation about? It's about understanding the Casper mindset and trying to think, okay, what does a fourth quartile answer look like? So to those who just joined, we're going to send you these slides at the end of the presentation to your emails. So don't fret about taking notes on everything or screenshotting everything. We're going to send you these slides. And this presentation used to be called the Advanced Casper Strategies presentation because it's geared towards someone who understands the Casper test and the format. However, they are kind of stuck or plateauing, or they're wondering, okay, I'm getting these good answers, but how do I get into the next level to get that fourth quartile? All right. And by the way, to those who joined, please use the Q&A feature to leave any questions as they arise. So I took the Casper test 3 times, and our guest speakers have taken it as well, some several times. I took it twice for the Canadian medical school cycle. I'm assuming most people here are Canadians applying to medical school. So if that's not true, leave it in the chat so I can gear the presentation towards you as well. And then if you take it in a different country, if you're going to apply to US medical schools, you have to take it again. So I took it a total of 3 times. All right, pharmacy as well. Nice. So I took it 3 times, once per cycle, you have to take it. It's what it looks like when you get that coveted score. This is my first cycle back in 2021. And then 2022, the 2 scores, medical residency and dental. Amazing. So the Casper background details, it's administered by Acuity Insights. Now, it's called the Casper 2 now. It's called Casper 2. There's a different Casper for different programs. So most programs in Canada use the Casper 2. So medicine, dentistry, pharma, and so on and so forth. Yes, when I took the US Casper, by the way, I'm looking at this question, it was the exact same format. So yeah, so most programs use it, and I've had friends take it on the same day. Different people in different programs. One was applying to physiotherapy, one was applying to pharmacy, one was applying to medicine. They all took it on the same day, and they all have the same questions. So I mean, that's my personal experience. So they're not going to ask you specific questions to what you're applying for. It's more so everyday ethics and everyday problem solving. Okay. And by the way, it's a huge component of some admissions processes, like for McMaster or for McGill's out-of-province selection process. Now, I'm not going to bore you. Again, this is the Advanced Casper Strategies talk, so I'm assuming you know the test format, but there are 6 video responses now, in case you haven't taken this test in 2 years, and there are 8 type scenarios. But here's where it gets interesting. And this is the first important slide, very important slide in the presentation, is understanding the scoring system. Now, I went to a college program, an undergraduate program at McMaster, where everybody was pretty smart, everybody was pretty ethical, and everyone was very nice. So if everyone is a pretty ethical person and no one's a psychopath, or very few people are, so everyone must necessarily give a decent answer to most of these ethical questions, right? So how do you stand out? How do you get that fourth quartile? Well, the thing is, you need to understand that you're scored against other people. You're not scored on how good your answer is, because almost everyone's answer is going to be ethical and well thought out, but you're scored against other people. So the second you understand that, it becomes not a question of how do I give the right answer, but how do I give an answer that is more organized than others, stands out in certain ways, and is unique and is memorable, because that is the only way you're going to be able to stand out against other people. So this is really a test about standing out, of course, in a good way. Nice. So here at the Bright Doctor, we categorize the questions in the Casper into 4 categories: a scenario-based question, a thought provoker, a personal story, or a personal reflection. And our goal throughout this presentation is to show you how to approach each and every one of these question types, starting with scenario-based questions. All right, so let's begin. And I believe the best way to learn is through practice. Let's do this question together. You're a junior manager at a company that has recently merged with another firm. Employees from both companies are finding it challenging to integrate, with loyalty to their original companies causing rifts. During a team building exercise, you overhear derogatory comments being made about the work ethic of employees from the other firm. So this is an example of a scenario-based question that you could encounter some variation of this on your Casper examination. This might be written out, or it might even be a video, a scenario video where you have to watch some actors, the very, very good actors act it out. And once you do enough practice questions, you can start anticipating what they're going to ask you. So the first question is usually, what are you going to do, right? So how would you handle the situation in the moment? And this is, of course, as a junior manager at the company. And something a lot of people like to use is the PPRDJ framework. Now, I want someone to raise their hands. Have you heard of the PPRDJ framework? Or just put in the chat, in the Q&A. Yeah, so a few people raising their hands, the PPRDJ framework. All right, so let's look at this framework, PPRDJ. Each letter stands for a different word, obviously. So you go through the problem, perspectives, your responsibility, the decision you're going to make, and why you're making that decision. And let's see how we could use it to answer this scenario. So P, what's the problem? In this scenario, I've overheard derogatory comments made by colleagues after a merger happens between two firms. This is not professional behavior and must be addressed, okay? That's the problem. The perspectives. So the perspectives in this scenario that must be addressed include the well-being of the workers in both firms, the corporate interest of the company and its shareholders, and ultimately the clients of our company. All these could suffer as a result of disharmony in the firm, right? These are the different perspectives in our scenario. And what's our responsibility here? Okay, I'm a junior manager, so it's my duty to foster a positive and inclusive work environment, addressing issues that might hamper team cohesion. What's your decision? What are you going to do? Consequently, in this situation, I will immediately intervene, addressing the comments in a calm and constructive manner, emphasizing the importance of respect, and later consider additional training or interventions to aid integration. That's PPRD. Now, the J, why are you going to do that? Justification is promoting a culture of respect and understanding is vital for the productivity and morale of the merged team, ensuring everyone feels valued and included. Okay. So Mohop asks, with the PPRDJ framework, do you think it's possible to stand out and get a high fourth quartile given that many people are using it? And Mohop, that is a great question, and it's going to be tied to this next point. We think the PPRDJ framework is a good start. Okay, it's a good start, but here's the thing. Different questions require you to focus on different competencies, right? So everyone's using this plug and chug framework, spending 20% of their time on each single letter, spending a minute summarizing the question in the P part problem. And although it is a mature way, it's a very well organized, coherent, cohesive way of giving your answer, something that I've noticed, and so have many of my colleagues who scored well in the Casper, is everyone's trying to use this framework. And imagine a scenario-based question where the line of thinking of how you're supposed to, approach it is more or less straightforward, right? You need to go talk to these individuals and find some, get one of them to apologize, whatever, whatnot. If everyone's going to say the same thing and frame the same way and, stick to that rigid frame of thinking of PPRDJ, right? How are you going to stand out? Are you going to be the best PPRDJ writer, in the universe? I don't, it's a tall order. So even though it is a very mature way of approaching scenario-based questions and scenario-based problem solving, the issue is everyone's heard of this and you're scored against other people, so it's going to make it hard to stand out. Plus, it might not be the best way to spend your time on the Casper. So what are the ways that you can stand out? And after taking this exam 3 times, I've distilled it down to these 5 ways. Okay, these 5 ways I think are the 5 ways to stand out. And this is the most important. If you remember nothing else from this presentation, this is the slide you should take home. Standing out is either you're going to address more perspectives than other people, you're going to offer more alternative solutions than other people, right? So it could be a creative solution, or it could even be a way to prevent a problem from occurring or recurring in the future. You're more personable than other people. So the way you write, the way you talk is more human It's more relatable. People feel like you're telling the truth and you're not, BSing them, so to say. You make connections. Perhaps you make connections to your personal life, to your future career, or you demonstrate some sort of domain knowledge. Maybe you introduce some scientific knowledge, maybe introduce some social sciences knowledge, psychology, or maybe you talk about some real world news, some current events, and you find a way to tie that into your answer. So you make connections. And lastly, you explain why. Why are you going to do something? Why are you taking a certain course of action or deciding against a certain course of action? And my job in this presentation is to show you, during my parts, how to apply all these 5 ways to stand out. And we've actually already seen some of them. In the PPRDJ framework, we had a very high depth of perspective consideration. I mean, it's built into the framework. You'd be silly to not think of all the perspectives, right? So not only do we talk about the workers involved, but okay, if the workers are having trouble, well, maybe the corporate interests of the company and the shareholders, right? The company could start failing or whatnot. And that's going to impact the clients of the company, right? Maybe we're making something for our clients and now it's going to uh, not be made in a efficient manner. And the J, we explain why, right? So a lot of people, they love saying what they're going to do. In this situation, I'm going to do this, this, and that. But Jay, why are you doing that? Because of promoting a culture of respect and understanding, and so on and so forth. So we've seen 2 of these 5 ways to stand out already. But again, I'm going to just say one more time, the PPRJ framework, it's redundant. So you're re-summarizing. I see people do this all the time, re-summarize the entire scenario. And imagine, because on the Casper, you have a different person assigned to every question. So you have 14 questions, 14 scenarios, all being looked at by a different person. And that person is going to look at many, many answers to the same scenario. So imagine every single person, like, you're grading 100 answers, and every single person starts off by summarizing the question. Well, I mean, you're going to want to fall asleep, right? Because it's like, oh, why are you summarizing the question? Now, obviously, I know what the question is. Obviously, you know what the question is. And especially, when you have a typed answer, you only have 5 minutes split between 3 questions, or you only have 1 minute to speak. Why are you wasting your time summarizing the question again? It's an absolute waste of time because you don't get any points for who has the best summary. Also, it sounds robotic. I know people who will speak like this on their video portion. They'll say, oh, the perspectives in this scenario that must be addressed include, like, who talks like that in person, right? I talk to the camera like I talk to a friend. Honestly, I do. And it's done me very, very well. In fact, I scored a high 4th quartile several times. I can explain, if anyone puts in the Q&A, I can explain how I know that. Yeah, okay, so robotic, boom. Now, let's look at a completely different answer to the same question. Okay, it's the same scenario to the same question. Imagine instead we say this. Can I zoom in? Yeah. Okay. So how would you handle that same situation? In the moment, I would approach the individuals making the derogatory comments and calmly address the situation. Drawing from my experience as a peer mediator at the University of Toronto, I would use the I statement technique. I overheard the conversation and felt concerned about the sentiments being expressed. Our goal is to foster a collaborative environment, and such comments might hinder that. By not directly accusing them, the aim is to encourage reflection without putting them on the defensive. I would also remind them of the company's values and the importance of respecting all colleagues, regardless of their original affiliation. So wow, that's a radically different answer than the PPRDJ framework, right? But let's look at what this answer gets right. So first off, it's a very mature way of addressing it, right? So it addresses the question, right? It addresses how you're going to approach the scenario. There's no question about that. But again, everyone addresses that. So let's see how they went above and beyond. First of all, they were very highly personable, right? I would use the I statement technique, and then they fully say a sentence that would come out of their mouths. I overheard the conversation and felt concerned about the sentiments being expressed. So now this person, this answer, is describing how they would talk to the individuals in this scenario, and it's very empathetic, it's very mature, and it explains their line of thinking in a very mature way. Yeah, mature way and professional and polite way. So let's see what else they get right. They have a highly skillful integration of their personal experiences. So they say, Drawing from my experience as a peer mediator at the University of Toronto, I would use the I statement technique. So very skillfully, they've integrated a personal experience, an extracurricular. And I know people love to, or they think they need to shove their extracurricular activities into their Casper answers. And I rarely did that. I rarely did that. The thing is, you shouldn't do it if it doesn't add to your answer. But this is, it's woven in a very fine and skillful, artful way that makes this answer unique and actually has that extracurricular add to what's going on, right? I was a peer mediator and I learned this technique of speaking of conflict resolution, and here's what I would say. So if y'all remember, these are two of the ways to stand out here. Where was that slide? Yeah, so they made a connection to their personal life, and they've already, number 3, be personable. Let's see what else the question is, right? They made a broad connection at the end. So not only do they explain what they're going to do, but they're going to, talk about the company's values, respecting all colleagues. So there's a broad connection. And let's look at this go beyond section. What else could have been done? For example, you could have suggested informal coffee chats or lunches to encourage employees from both firms to get to know each other better. Wow, right? So that's a creative solution. These are all ways to go beyond, and these are all ways that this answer stands out without using, a PPRDJ framework. And please note that in a scenario-based question, where everyone's going to say the same thing, basically, like what they're going to do, if you can find a way, and obviously don't force it, do not force it, but if you can find a way to integrate a personal experience like this, you recognize that this automatically makes your answer unique, because who else can write that answer? No one else, because that's your personal experience. Right? So this comes back to the main point. It's a test about standing out against other people. All right, everybody. So a common mistake I see is the private conversation script. That's what I call it. And I see people love to write this line in their Casper answers or in their, when they're speaking. And it's like, I don't know, they had a dream and God told them, hey, you need to put this sentence in your Casper answer and you're going to get a 4th quartile. I really think that's the motif here, because people use this sentence religiously. Like, it doesn't even have anything to do with the question, and they'll put this sentence in there somewhere. Now, I want someone in the chat or raise your hand. Who's heard of this sentence? Like, who's seen someone, write this? Yeah, okay, see, there's like 20. That's the most hands I've ever seen raised in my life. Okay, people have seen this sentence. All right, I'm not making this up, y'all. In this scenario, I'd like to gather more information and have a private conversation with this person and have a non-judgmental tone. Beautiful, right? So can someone, my religion is a sentence law. That's a good one. Guilty as charged. Okay. Can someone tell me what's wrong with this sentence? 2 things. Just like put it in the chat or just speak up. You're not explaining why. That's actually right, and everybody uses it. Okay, beautiful. All right, you guys actually got both parts. So this sentence, believe it or not, is actually a very mature way of approaching a situation. It is, right? You're gonna not jump to conclusions. You're gonna gather more information. You're gonna have a private conversation with someone, right? You're not gonna embarrass them. Right? Well, sometimes you have to just address something up front. And having a non-judgmental tone, well, that's always conducive to having a productive conversation. So what's wrong with it? Why don't I like using this? Is exactly what y'all said. Number 1, no one explains why. And number 2, everyone's saying the same thing. So let's look if we were to apply, if we just had to, we're itching to use the sentence in our scenario, how would we have gone about it? So we would firstly say we're going to have a private conversation first, but it actually makes our problem solving more complex here. And remember, you're under timed environment. You're under a timed environment, so you don't necessarily want to make something more complex for yourself. Because first you're going to say, okay, I'm going to have 2 conversations that are private in nature. Then I'm going to have to make one of the people apologize to the other person. And then what are you going to do if the actions were to repeat? It really launches you into this deep decision-making tree, if-then scenarios and blah, 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 blah. And it really complicates the way you want to answer it. Now, sometimes, obviously, you have to have private conversations. But here, if a derogatory comment is made, I mean, this could be a racist comment, this could be a sexist comment, it could be anything. Why not just address it right then and there so you show the entire company, hey, we don't stand for this at all. We're not going to let this simmer and then, 10 days down the line, I'm going to send an email, BCC them and be like, hey guys, we need to talk to you. So I hope you acknowledge that. But imagine you really want to use a sentence, right? You just can't. You're dying to use the sentence. Let's see how we can fix it. And maybe I've used it once or twice, but I've used the fixed way. So, okay, before we're going to say, in this scenario, I like to gather more information and have a private conversation with this person and have a non-judgmental tone. Wow, I haven't heard that one before. But imagine we say this instead. In this scenario, I'd like to gather more information in order to make a well-informed decision on my course of action and understand the full extent of the derogatory comments that were made and who they affected. I would have a private conversation with this person and have a non-judgmental tone in order to make them feel comfortable in sharing details with me and that we could have a productive conversation. Night and day, everyone. This is night and day. The first one is, I'm going to do this, this, and that. The second is, I understand why I'm doing that. And the Casper, Acuity Insights, they published the 10 core competencies of the Casper that are meant to be assessed. And I'm going to show you those actually. They're part of the presentation as well. How are you going to show those competencies if you're not explaining why you're doing things? If you're just going to have a million creative solutions, I'm going to do this, 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 and this. I'm going to have an empathetic conversation. I'm going to have a compassionate conversation. I'm going to have, put the adjective there. People love, using these adjectives like they give you brownie points. But if you can't explain what you're going to do or can't explain why you're doing it, I think you're in trouble. So let me reiterate, there's no one right answer. There's no one answer that addresses all the ways to go beyond. And you compete on all the ways that you can stand out. So practice, practice, practice. And by the way, this interface with these example expert answers and the ideas to go beyond, red flags to avoid, these all come from the Bright Doctor website, where there's over 100 scenarios and 300 sub-questions. So there's 300 of these for y'all to look at. Let me look at any questions. Okay, you're not answering exactly. Okay, before, would you give a third answer more, depending on how? Before would probably, I have no clue what that means. Please resend that question. All right, are there any questions for me here? Someone asked, how do you know that with respect to my fourth quartile Casper? I'll mention that at the end. Okay, I don't see any questions. I'm just going to keep going forward. Yeah, these are practice questions from our website, thebrightdoctor.com. There's 10 free practice questions that y'all can check out. We'll get to that later. So anyways, my approach, kind of in a step-by-step manner. Well, actually, it's not a step-by-step manner. I didn't use a framework when I answered things, but I would begin by acknowledging the main problem and its importance, right? And in really just one quick sentence, it's not a summary. Remember, it's not a summary. I'm not wasting my time summarizing, but I will say, like, very quickly, I will acknowledge what's going wrong. In this scenario, a conflict between the workers of our company is causing disharmony and must be addressed. Boom. In one sentence, I just made that on the fly, right? I've been out of the Casper practice realm, but I made that on the fly. You acknowledge that you understand the main importance of what's going on very, very quickly. And then I explored the perspectives, obviously, mentioning my values and responsibilities and duties in the process. So I'd go through different people who are affected. But then this is not, this is not step by step. I'd find ways to be personable, and you can look, you can read that. Again, we're sending the slides later. I'd state the actions I take. Sometimes I just state them out front. Sometimes you have to use if then, if this, then that. But most importantly, I'd explain why, right? What's the thinking behind my choices and actions? And your why, here you can read it, should address one of the 10 core competencies. And here they are: collaboration, communication, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, there's 10 of them. So these are the competencies that you're being assessed on. And lastly, stand out. I'd look to those 5 ways to stand out, and I'd find cool ways to stand out. I hope that makes sense. And I see a lot of questions pouring in. Y'all, we're going to take a break in the middle probably to do some Q&A, but at the end is going to be the big Q&A. And by the way, our website, thebrightdoctor.com, not only do we have the expert model answers to the questions, but we also highlight them in with respect to these frameworks as well. So y'all can check that out on your own time. So now let's bring on a guest speaker, Rama, medical student at the University of Ottawa, which obviously values the Casper very, very heavily. Thank you for joining us, Rama. I can't see anybody or anything. Let me just, if you're there, please speak up.
Hello,
There you go.
Kevin. Okay. Thank you so much for having me, Kevin, and thanks for the great presentation. It's a pleasure to be here again. I've personally benefited from a lot of the material that you guys have given me. I've spoken to Kevin last year when I was in my application cycle, and it was a great help seeing the progress that you guys have made on this software has been amazing to see, and I hope you guys really understand that. But anyways, so I do have a couple of tips that I might have wanted to hear when I was an incoming applicant, and a couple that I've given to a few of my friends applying, and a lot of them center around how to stand out. But I think I'll give the basics and indicate what tips I give just specifically for being unique later on. So, in terms of practice strategies, this may have been mentioned by a few people, but I really think for any standardized test, you might have done this for the MCAT. I personally did it for a couple other exams. Start with timed practice. So you can start off saying, okay, you have your 1 minute video answer, but then instead of going right back in and checking over what you said in that answer or how you could have improved it, go back and actually do it on time. Like, don't review it at all. Don't compare it to any references. See what you would have done if you had a little bit more time, and then compare those two answers to each other. See, what did I do when I knew I didn't have to worry about the clock? And then notice, did I have extra fluff here that I didn't need to? What were the key sentences that actually made up the core of my answer? And try to hone it in on just those. And that's the way that you can create a framework that feels natural to you. I know that they have just mentioned a framework, and I know that Kevin, you said that you don't often use just one singular thing because there is no one size fits all, but there is a voice that you can often find yourself using throughout these answers. And as soon as you identify that by doing both timed and untimed practices, the better you'll be. In terms of answer structure, I found that the most times that I was proud of the answers and the times that I was most confident in them based on what other feedback people have given me and how even I myself felt was when I was pretty illustrative in my answers. So instead of just saying, I would direct them to resources in the area, say, I would direct them to the community center like XYZ in Ottawa, or like say things that will help the person reviewing your application be like, wow, or sorry, your Casper test, this person really knows what they're doing. They probably have specific experiences here. They know what to say. And it also helps you stand out because a lot of people will say, I'll direct them to resources. I'll remind them of their mental well-being. If you can throw in like a random stat, a random specific thing, I think that would really work wonders for you. Because again, like Kevin mentioned, you're ranked like compared to other people. It's not just against like an arbitrary metric. In terms of conflict or dilemma scenarios, I found it really useful to look specifically into certain like de-escalation techniques. I know that we mentioned in terms of listening, active listening, like I would nod my head or I would repeat their sentence back to ensure that they know that I'm listening. But things that you can pick up that are not as conventional would also be nice to mention. In terms of questions like pick a side, if you had to do XYZ, what would you do? I think I hear a lot of different types of advice, and everything is good if you're able to phrase it correctly. Again, Casper, there's no right or wrong. But I found that the way that I've been able to show the most level of nuance is when I start by saying, these are the two areas, or these are the two, tensions that I need to balance. And on the one hand, I understand why this person would feel this way, and on the other, I can really resonate with this other person saying that. Overall, though, I do believe that, let's say it's a yes or no, no, we should not be doing this. But then at the end, finish off with a compromise that shows that you've still understood the kind of intricacies. So I'll give an example. Let's say you're talking about an opioid crisis. Someone wants to put a safety injection site in one of your neighborhoods, and a lot of the suburban areas, a lot of the people in the suburbs disagree. The customer question will present and say, what would you do in this situation? Would you allow the safety injection site to go through? You can start by saying, I understand the significance of having a safety injection site because it can serve as an important point of contact for those who need rehabilitation care. And I understand how underprivileged this community is and what a help this can be based on the research that it's been provided, et cetera, et cetera. On the other hand, I understand that many parents will rightfully have concerns over the fact that it's very visible. They may have issues with safety. And I also don't want to minimize or invalidate their experiences. For the kind of grand consensus, given the fact that this is going to be a unanimous decision, of course, you can say, I would first collect as much data as I could if I'm collaborating. You're still on a time crunch, so the faster you can type, the better, of course. But after collaborating, after discussing, if I find that it is still most of the people who don't want this safety center, then I would say, I would not want to build it in the place that has been mentioned. However, I would advocate for accessibility through maybe like shuttle centers within the city to places where others who actually need it, the underprivileged, could access a safety center far away. That way, I'm able to compromise and still prioritize the needs of the majority of the population and keep, both safeties in mind. So you see how I've somehow still incorporated the yes and the no, but I made my position very clear. No, I would not have a safety, like a safe injection site. And this is why. And I think by doing that, you're able to really get through the answer a lot better because you have a clear idea of where you're going. The one caveat with this, though, is if you feel like you can't type fast enough, you still really need to prioritize having a yes or a no. You don't want to just flip flop both ways because that way you show that you're not a strong willed. You don't really have a clear idea. So some people have started with no, I would not. And then you can go into and here's why. In case you don't get through the rest of your answer, at least you've shown that you've taken a solid position. At the end, I find that there's a couple like life hacks that can help kind of differentiate you. And one of them is creating like a feedback statement. So, for example, say you've given, you were a manager and you had to fire somebody because of budget cuts. You can obviously give your whole solution, give them your whole spiel. This is difficult. I want to balance their comfort, but also the economics and the rest of the justice of the team. And I would start by letting them know that there are other solutions, direct them to resources, et cetera, et cetera. Then I would fire them, of course, as you need to. And then you can say, I would follow up with them in a few months to make sure that they've taken use of the resources I've given them. Maybe I would check up to let them know that they feel valued. Something to show that like you exist kind of outside of the specific context of this scenario. Like you kind of have a forward thinking plan. So I feel like something like that can suggest future preventative measures also. Like say you can start by making sure that you've been very open. Say in the future, I would ensure that I'm very open and transparent about the budgetary restraints in future contracts. Things like that that can show that you're not just yes or no at this exact moment. What am I doing? What am I doing in the future? How can I stop this from happening again? And how can I ensure that the solution that I put into place is actually effective? I think you can move on to the next slide. Right. And so in terms of questions about like how to be adaptable, flexible, there are going to be, I know there's like a binary, either it's going to be a situation based or like a non-case based, but those kind of vary. So sometimes I get in the practice, it's like, why is patient important? Why is patience important versus questions like, tell me about a time where you resolved a conflict. The first one is a little tricky because you would think, oh, why is patience important for a physician? That's a very easy answer. It's important because you need to take care of people of different backgrounds. They might lose their temper with you, et cetera, et cetera. You need to be resilient. I think what you really need to center in understanding a question like this is you're not the only person answering it. So you need to make sure that you've put in your own personal experiences, even if it doesn't sound like you need to. How are you going to set yourself apart? Even if you don't have enough room, you don't have time, say it's a video answer, if you're not typing fast enough, you don't have to go through the whole like star L method. It doesn't have to be that crazy. You can just say, in my time at palliative care, this came out the most when I saw patients that did XYZ, and continue the rest of why patience is important for a physician. The more personality that you can inject into answers like these, the more memorable you'll be and the more likely you are to score better compared to others who aren't doing those things. You can also save a little bit of time. So at the beginning, Kevin just mentioned too, you don't need to rephrase the whole situation at all. You just mentioned the tensions in a few words and then you leave it at that. Don't say this is tough because I am now the son of what. They don't care. They already know the question. Like they're only reviewing that question. So I think they're sick and tired of hearing it anyways. Save your time, use that for something else. In terms of the video responses, it's really important for you to eliminate any sources of additional words like ums, ahs, and that really can get eliminated by, well, this is going to sound really hypocritical because I tend to speak really quickly, but slow down. I had to learn to slow down when I was writing the Casper, and make sure that you're really enunciating each one of your words. And if you find that you're running out of time, even with the word slow down, that means that there's a lot of fluff because you can typically make any answer concise enough to fit into a minute as long as you understand the framework that you're using. Always prioritize using the strong introduction and a strong conclusion because, again, just as any meeting, how you start and how you end is what's going to be the most memorable. If you mess up in the middle, do not let it affect the rest of your response because you can still finish off very strongly and that will probably be forgotten. Another note about like saying a video response or any response in general. One thing that I used to throw out there a lot, and that usually when I would get my Casper answers reviewed by other students when I was still practicing, is like the idea of setting a positive precedent. And I feel like that's a really easy one that you can just say, and it kind of shows that you have a grander understanding of like what is the implication of making this decision correctly once. So say it's a tough one where you have to like snitch on your friend for cheating. it's going to be hard, and you do need to acknowledge the fact that it won't be easy to snitch. And maybe your only justification isn't just that it's unfair for the class. Maybe that sounds like just every other person answering that question. But you say, because I understand the importance of setting positive precedences in the classroom, because I understand that integrity has far-reaching implications, for example. I understand that if this happens once, that can lead to many other negative behaviors, and I want that person to benefit the most. And finally, this is kind of tying in all the same. There should be a lot of strong nuance in your responses. So don't just talk about like what are the ethical implications. If you can put in like a culturally sensitive thing, if you can talk about societal factors, if you can really bring in parts of your personality into the answer, that's going to do a lot for you in the long run. And it's going to be a lot easier for you to justify your points. So I'm not sure if I'm over or under time, but those were kind of the key pointers I had, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Rama. I'm seeing some questions if you just want to quickly, probably the ones at 7:26 and afterwards.
All right, I'll go check those out right now.
Yeah.
7, 8:26 and afterwards. Okay.
Oh,
So,
yeah. Central time.
no worries. Okay. What if you aren't the fastest typer and can't get to all three questions? So this might be a more general one directed to the both of us. I've heard many times that you do not need to get to all three questions. It would be great if you do and aim for that, but if you can answer two really well, that often will overcome, like that'll compensate for your third not really well done. So maybe choose the one that you're most confident in to start off with and have really good ones for that, and they'll understand if you run out of time, or at least start an answer if you can't finish. Do you have anything to add to that, Kevin?
Yeah. So I would set hard deadlines for myself, but I'd give myself 2 minutes for the first one if it's a typed one, then 1 minute 30 for each after. Just because the first one I always think is the one that needs the most background. Like you have to kind of set your foundation of thinking down. So I give myself 2 minutes for that. And sometimes by the third one, I only get 2 or 3 sentences down. It would be weaker. But of course, like as you acknowledged, it's a test about standing out. So I mean, you do want to practice to the point where you're not missing the third question that often.
Yeah, that's a great point as well. I think Okay, I think there's another question too about, are there medical ethics? Are they fair game for the Casper test? I'll just tell you about my own experience. I didn't see many difficult ethical questions that came up, like how you would expect in a medical school interview. It doesn't hurt to be super prepared, but I think be most ready for the ones that come up the most in your practice tests. And those aren't often like eugenics or like MAID or organ donation. I don't think you'll see those huge themes. So they're, I think, less high yield, but even if they do, don't stress out. There will be a question from left field. I know that there was one from mine too. Focus on sounding authentic, focus on making sure that you've shown enough nuance, and any question will pass eventually. And in the large scheme of things, you don't need to nail every single one of them. Just be confident enough to know that you can probably hit all of the key points for most of what you get asked. In terms of, there was a question about should if-then statements be used in all situational questions? Sometimes it doesn't feel natural. I don't know if, Kevin, you might disagree with me on this. I think sounding natural is probably the best thing you can do for yourself. If an if-then statement starts to sound forced, that'll become very easy to tell and very apparent for the person reading it. So if that doesn't work for you, although I would be curious to see what kind of examples you could come up with where an if then statement wouldn't be suitable, because even if you don't think there is a reasonable variable, there sometimes is. So even let's say it's like you see a baby crying on the plane, then what are you going to do about it? Someone's complaining. It doesn't necessarily have to be, I would start by consoling the baby. Maybe some people who don't like if then statements can say that, but it's always easy to throw in, if the mom is stressed, then I would do this. If the mom is not, then I would suggest to the flight attendant. You can kind of always be more creative. Sometimes I feel like it's just an issue of not doing enough practice. Then you can usually hone in on any if then statement you want, and it will feel natural. So if you've done a lot of practice and you feel like it doesn't flow well, sure, you don't have to use it always, but I would suggest that you practice as much as you can, and then they'll start to feel better. And then let me see. Will there be a personal? Go ahead.
Wait a minute, let's do one more question and then I'll let you get on with your day.
Okay, thank you. Do I go for, I don't see the upvote sort of thing, so I'll just go with any one of them. Will there be personal questions like describe a time you demonstrated altruism? That's easy. Yes. That's all. Thank you guys so much.
Awesome. And everyone, please give a big thank you, a big round of applause to Rama for sharing her experience with us. It's always important because, there's no one right answer on the Casper, and Rama did very, very well as well. Thank you, Rama.
Thanks, Kevin. Have a good day, everybody. Bye.
Have a good night. All right. Let's continue, everybody, to personal story questions. Okay. This is the next section. So I see a lot of questions. Again, I'm going to try to address all of them, but I think we're going to answer a lot of them on the way. So what's a personal story question? This is like, hey, can you recall a situation where you performed under pressure, right? How did you handle it? It's just, something from your life. Name a time this happened. Name a time you overcame a challenge. Name a time this, blah, blah, blah. So let's look at this question. Recall a situation where you perform under pressure. And when it comes to personal story questions, I like to use the STAR method. So STAR, situation, task, action, and then the result. So let's look at an example answer to this question. Last semester in the McMaster Biology Society, while organizing a programming skills workshop for first-year students, we encountered an unexpected vendor cancellation, leaving us without crucial materials. I was tasked with swiftly finding a replacement vendor without overshooting our budget. So that's the S and the T. Now, what was the action that I took? Consequently, I quickly researched alternative suppliers, assessed their offerings against our needs, and strategically approached the most promising ones to renegotiate terms suitable for our budget. I use strategies like calling suppliers instead of email to ensure rapid communication. And lastly, the result, you're not going to leave them on a cliffhanger. Ultimately, we secured the necessary materials under budget, and the workshop went on without a hitch, earning praise from attendees. So, y'all, that's the STAR method. So people love to ask me, Kevin, you just told me not to use the PPRDJ framework. So why are you telling me to use the STAR method, right? There's one less letter. It's STAR. So I'm going to be even more bland in my answer, right? Because everyone's going to use the STAR method. And if you ask me that, I would say, okay, I can tell you haven't been listening very, very closely to this presentation because the core tenet of this test is about standing out. And remember, we're talking about personal story questions. So necessarily, if it's a story about your own life, it's automatically unique by virtue of the token that it's your own life. It's just your own life story. So you're automatically a unique answer, right? Does that make sense? So the STAR, the STAR method, is simply a very coherent, a very well-organized manner of putting your answer together and communicating it in a way that people can understand and can follow quickly. And that's about it. It's a way of organizing your life stories. Okay, that's what it is. But here's the thing: there's a missing letter. I think it should be called the START method. And I really think I invented this because if you look online, you'll find STAR method. You won't find START method. And it's been 2 years of me giving this presentation, and no one can say if they've heard of the START method. So I think I invented this. The T stands for takeaway, which is a lesson that you learned. So when it comes to your takeaway, you're going to describe what you took away from the personal experience. You may want to make connections between the competencies you learned or demonstrated in your future career. Okay, let's see. And there's an art to the takeaway. Where possible, I either pick a personal story as my takeaway or a connection to my future profession. And it's going to make sense which one you're going to use. Obviously, if we're giving a personal story to begin with, we're going to pick number 2. And let's imagine we give the same exact answer to the same question, okay? But then after we say this, as I pursue a career in medicine, in pharmacy and dentistry and anything, I will continue to draw on such skills to stay collected in rapidly changing situations. Through strong communication skills, along with problem solving, I will continue to ensure team needs are met for the benefit of my future patients. Wow. Not only did this answer address the question, right? Name a time you overcame or you dealt with a difficult situation, but it shows competencies, obviously the competencies that are being looked at in this exam, but then you reflected on those competencies, you reflected on that story and thought to yourself, okay, how does this apply to my future as a medical student, as a dental student, or so on and so forth. And this is a very, very mature and unique addition to your personal story. So I always had some sort of takeaway from my personal stories. Okay, and pro tip, you don't get any points for the S and the T. You could have the coolest situation in the history of scenarios. You could have said, I was curing cancer in the White House. It doesn't matter. It's about these actions. It's about how you describe your thinking, right? You explain why you did certain things and the thought process, and then what you took away from it and how you reflected on it. That's where you get your points. Okay, so it's this green section. So get this S and the T, done with as soon as possible. So you just put the person in the shoes that you were in without any unnecessary details. Okay. Now who just said hard to lie on the spot and sound genuine? What does that mean? Please elaborate on that. Can we lie here or do they all have to be true experiences? Okay, that's what you mean. Uh, listen, you have at least, I'm guessing you have a week until you're Casper, so do a lot and a lot of these personal type of questions so you see what stories you're missing. And if you dig deep down enough, you'll find some variant of a story that will apply. So actually, if you go on our website, the Casper question bank right here, we have 102 scenarios. You can even filter it down by only personal scenarios. So that'll really help you hone in on which questions or which stories you don't have. I would not make up a story, but just pick some story and kind of shape it towards what's going on if in a way that can be relevant. So let's do another practice question together. You're part of a community gardening group, and recently a new member, Lydia, joined and has been offering numerous suggestions for changes. While some of her ideas are innovative, others are not feasible due to budget constraints. Some long-standing members are starting to feel overwhelmed by her enthusiasm and are considering asking her to leave the group. So this is an example. This is a scenario-based question actually, but we're talking about how to give cool takeaways. So let's look at a question. Okay, what are you going to do? How would you approach Lydia about the group's concerns without discouraging her passion? And imagine we give some amazing answer, right? Some sort of amazing answer, which I trust all of you will. And then we say, moreover, every Sunday I volunteer at St. Joseph's Hospital as team lead for community outreach. Often volunteers in my team disagree about courses of action, and I turn to the same notions of setting group expectations, reviewing budgets, and spending one-on-one time to address concerns and help St. Joseph's reach its community goals. So this is a personal story connection, right? So you can imagine in this amazing answer, we discussed these three things: setting group expectations, reviewing budgets, and spending one-on-one time. So we took these three things and we're like, hey, by the way, this connects to this personal experience I had. Boom, that's my reflection on it. Or what if we connect it to our future profession? We could instead say, resolving conflicts within teams will be an incredibly important skill for me in the future as I work in highly interdisciplinary groups to provide team-based care to my future patients. Wow. This person is ready to be a resident. I mean, wow. Like this person, it's a beautiful reflection on these core competencies and what they mean for your future. Now, some people say, okay, Kevin, do I need a personal story in every single scenario-based question or whatever? No, no. In fact, maybe I rarely had one. But it's the times where it just kind of comes to mind and it's like, hey, this kind of connects to this. Or when you're doing all this practice and you're like, hey, I could have actually mentioned this story very briefly in like 1 or 2 sentences because it kind of ties into how I'm going to approach the situation. Those are the ones that really help you go beyond. And these takeaways where I connect it to my future profession, I would actually have one for every single competency, right? If it's a conflict-based question, then I'd say, okay, in the future, I'm going to work with people from all walks of life and these interdisciplinary groups, providing team-based care, blah, 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 blah. So I'd have a takeaway for every single kind of question, whether it's a communication question, a conflict resolution question, a cultural humility question, cultural competency question. And I would keep reusing these takeaways in every single question through every scenario on my Casper because a different person grades every scenario, right? So you could use the same takeaway for like collaboration like 4 times. But if it's in a different scenario every time, well, it's the first time you used it for that scenario and a different person's looking at it. So the person's not going to be like, hey, this person just copied, the same idea like 5 times. Well, no, it's a different person reading it. All right, y'all. So, and the takeaway to me is it's kind of like style points. If you ever played a video game or you're playing football and you can get a touchdown, but you can do some showboating before you reach the end zone, or maybe, it's one of these RPGs. I think that's what they're called. You get style points. So it's like you give a very mature, well-constructed answer using the star method, and then you give them something more. And that's what makes a difference. All right, y'all. Okay. Let's see if there's any. Does the website offer French questions? I'm very sorry, the website does not offer French questions. Memorize specific personal examples for personal. Yeah, so I'll talk about you want to have your personal stories memorized. You don't want, when you're asked about, name a time, this or that, you don't want it to be the first time that you, yeah, we have frameworks for every type of question. Yeah, you can check out our website for each and every one of the frameworks. They apply to the free questions we have, so you can check that out. Okay. Yeah, this is actually the framework for. Okay, anyway, so let's talk about personal reflection questions. So this is usually you're asked the personal story question, and then the second follow-up is like, oh, what would you have done differently? Or like, were you happy with the outcome? So we have a framework on our website for that. I'm not gonna talk about it too much, just to like respect your time, because I'm trying to keep this short. But yeah, we explain it very well in our frameworks. Yeah, again, we on all our 100+ scenarios, 300+ questions answers, we highlight how those frameworks apply. And then thought provokers are like, you're given something like a quote, like, oh, reflect on the statement. And yeah, this is our framework. We call it the clear method. Again, you don't do step by step, but it's generally how you should be thinking about a thought provoker question. We don't even we just call it a method, actually. And yeah, I'm not going to bore you all. We're going to send you the slides. You can read this on your own time and check out our website for more examples. So let's bring on Alexander to actually discuss these thought provoker and personal reflection questions. Welcome, Alexander, a first-year medical student from McGill and a father. I mean, a really, really amazing, inspiring candidate. I mean, he's going to let you introduce yourself.
Hey guys, my name is Alex. Can you hear me properly?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, guys. So as I've been introduced, I'm a first year medical student at McGill University. English is not my first language, so bear with me. Anyways, I was asked to give you guys insight as how I prepared for Casper, and to be quite honest, I didn't prepare enough because when I did it, I did it twice. The first time I did it was to get into physiotherapy, and it went very well, even with little preparation. So I was like feeling very confident. The only thing I did back then was just do the practice exam on the Casper platform, and I felt like they give you a good insight as to what's to come. And I felt like I had this kind of it was always easy to me to read questions and be like, okay, this is what people want to hear and want you to think. And for that reason, I didn't prep, but I regretted it because what happened is Casper prep is huge. It's a big part of the interview prep. The second time I did Casper test was for medical school, sorry. And that time I did prep, and it made my interviews so much easier. So you guys are at the right place. I'll give you a little bit more precise insight to the kind of questions you can expect. So the first one are like the personal reflection questions. And those to me are probably the hardest, simply because you have to think on the spot. You have to go back in your memory and remember, like, when did this happen? How can I relate this to a personal event? So what I decided to do when I did Casper for the second time in my personal medical school interviews is I had scenarios. I thought about which events in my life were meaningful and that I could relate to multiple types of questions. For example, I've worked a lot. I've worked many years in a psychiatry hospital. So with that experience, I could come up easily with like teamwork situations, either good ones or bad ones. Same for resilience, frustrations, all those questions that you will definitely get asked. So find those little scenarios that you are familiar with, and it's not hard to think about, and use the same framework as you've just been presented. The takeaway is a big part of it. I wrote it without even going over the slides, and that's how much it stood with me. The START method. So always take away when applicable. And also for these questions, once you have your bank, just like go over them. That's what I would do. A few days before Casper, I'd go like, okay, if this is the question, where do I go? that's how I prep for those. Also, the kind of situations, the questions you will be asked is like the provoker questions. So they're gonna give you a sentence like, "Oh, what do you think of this?" And then they want you to give your insight. And to be honest, one of the big thing I would suggest is that you guys type. There's time for thinking, but it shouldn't take much. Like the test gives you a few seconds before after scenarios or such. Use that time, structure your answer in your head, and then as soon as you can, type or start talking. You don't want to be stuck like mid question and be like, oh, what are my thoughts again? No, you just want to use that time and you just want to use it as efficiently as possible. Um, the framework that is presented is the clear one. It's pretty strong. Honestly, I didn't use it personally because I thought that if I was going to, end up taking too much time trying to fill all the different sections like CLE, EAR, just write. Okay, that's one of the thing. Rama and she went over this typing fast versus slow. Honestly, I'm a fast typer, and I think that's an unfair advantage. If you guys can type like 50 words a minute, I would spend more time practicing my typing speed than prepping extensively for like the kind of answers you're going to give. It is unfair for sure, and it does make a difference at the end of the day. I've spoke with many people in my cohort, and some of them they literally told me they went from first quarter to third just improving their typing speed. That's how crazy it is. I don't know if everyone will agree with me, but that is my personal experience. Um, so for the thought provoker questions, always try to use strong examples to support your answers. Don't just give like something very broad and be like, oh yeah, we perform better under pressure. And you start giving like, try to give them like an actual insight as to who you are, your experiences. That makes your answer unique. That's what I did personally. And also, uh, there's another thing that I found very difficult while doing Casper exams or even the medical school interview ones is sometimes they give you like a situation, especially for those type of questions, the thought provoker ones, is you have like this dilemma is do I give them the answer that they want to hear or do I give them the answer I would give to like my best friend? So that's one of the little thing that I thought a long time about. And in in action, once I was doing the Casper or the interview, I always opted to give them what I think they want to hear. I don't know if that makes any sense. I could elaborate further if you guys want, but I always think that you'd rather keep it safe, but always, even if it maybe not your exact position in your everyday life, try to make it more unique, try to expand on it. Um, so yeah, that's pretty much my experience. If you guys have questions, I'm here. I'll go over them for sure. And just for a little bit of information, I did Casper twice. Both time I got a fourth quartile. I did not use the Bright Doctor resources for Casper, but I did use them for my med school interviews, and it was a pretty similar presentation to this. And honestly, it was the best money I've spent. It was the only money I've spent for my med school prep because you're gonna hear a lot of things like people spending thousands of dollars for every application rounds. It's crazy. Don't do it. If you think you need it, sure, go ahead. But I felt that with the banks of questions that were available to me, I felt prepared. I went over every single questions. I didn't answer them like all one by one, but I really wanted to have like this repertoire in my mind, and it worked pretty well, honestly. So yeah, I'm gonna go over the questions. Do you think I should cover anything else? We're good. Awesome.
Thank you, Alexander. Yes, I mean, just pick like four questions from the Q&A that that are interesting to you. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for that amazing talk.
All right. Yo, I mean, Rama did an amazing work, so bar was pretty high, but I'll go over some few questions. So what is the essence of Casper test for the med school application process? I mean, it's something that they came up with a few years ago, and it's very much to try and discern people like their professionalism and social capabilities before the interview. So it's kind of like a cutoff you have to meet beforehand. It is it's not perfect, but honestly, I kind of like it. I think it's maybe resolved some of the issue that they had in the past with the men's school applicant pool. Yeah, someone earlier asked also if you can lie. Yes, obviously you can lie. I mean, they're not gonna fact check everything, but if you get caught in your own lies or it doesn't sound authentic, like you're making something up, they're gonna know, and it's not gonna give you a good score. Also earlier, somebody asked, like, is it okay if we only answer 2 out of the 3? My definitive answer would be no, don't do that, because obviously it's going to put you at a big disadvantage. What I would do personally when I'm answering type questions, I would simply start typing. I would read quickly the 3 questions, 2, 3 questions, whatever it was. And the one I felt like I had thoughts coming very easily, I would start typing as soon as possible. And while typing, I'd start thinking about, okay, if I'm saying this here, what can I put in the next box? And when I would block or like my train of thought would stop, I would just simply go to the next one. And usually I could type out like a pretty decent answer for all 3 questions and even have time to like go over my grammar and such. I'm not saying you will have time, but it is something that's possible, sorry. Yes, I believe there's a recording. Oh no, no recording, but the slides will be made available to you. Does the website offer French questions? Moi, je suis francophone, puis honnêtement, j'ai utilisé le site web en anglais, puis ça m'a quand même beaucoup aidé. So even if there's no English, there's only English questions on the Bright Doctor. Being French, I mean, just use it. It's there, and you can just translate the questions if you want. ChatGPT is there for you. What else? Is there fourth quartile answers there to check your own answers with? They give you a pretty good idea about what a fourth quartile answer would be. Obviously, it's always very subjective, but the Bright Doctor gives you a very good insight as to what a very strong, probably fourth quartile answer would be. What's your word per minute? 100 words per minute is what I have.
Wow.
Yeah. So I would actually like before Casper, I do like it's in the slides, you guys will see, but it's 10 fast fingers. It's amazing. Just go there and type. Is
Yes.
45, 50 enough? Work on that. You got to get at least to 70, I'd say. It's not like black and white. You can work with 50 words per minute, but I definitely try to get that numbers up.
Amazing. And
Yeah.
thank you, Alexander. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, guys, for having me.
No. Everyone, big round of applause. Big thank you to Alexander for sharing his experiences with us. I mean, it's a very busy medical student, father. I mean, wow. Thank you, Alexander, and
Take care,
yeah,
guys.
we'll be in touch. I'll let you go on your way, and thank you for this amazing perspective. Okay, everyone. So there's around 10 to 15 minutes left, so I'm gonna let y'all go early. So all right, so this is the pro tips section, and these are all right. You're ready. You're giving good answers. Here's some pro tips. Okay, number 1, avoid extreme stances. And people say, Kevin, I've studied for 4 years. I've maintained my GPA. I've done my MCAT. I've done my DAT. I've done all these tests. You know, I've prepared for so many years, for so long. Why would I go on my Casper and say some crazy stuff? Why would I do that? But it's not that simple. I'll tell you why. Imagine there's a question that's like, should pharmaceutical companies be allowed to give samples of their latest product for free to family doctors, right? Should they be able to go to family doctors and give, hey, here's 10 free boxes of my latest drug that costs, $1 million? And I mean, if that's a question that you're asked, most people that I know would say no. No, you can't. Oh, pharmaceutical companies are very evil, and this is a conflict of interest. Oh no, conflict of interest. You can't be letting these pharma companies give gifts to the doctors, right? Well, here's the thing. Imagine instead of just jumping to that, being like, no, this is a conflict of interest, this is terrible, pharma companies are bad, blah, blah, blah. Imagine instead you say, well, okay, you consider some other points of view. Because in Canada, you have Medicare, which means medical care is free at point of service. However, you don't have pharmacare, which means drugs are not free. When you go get an antibiotic, when you go get, some sort of medication, you pay out of pocket for it. Maybe you have insurance, maybe your parents have insurance, maybe you're on some government program that helps, but nonetheless, it's not free to everyone. And usually you have a copay or something, right? So imagine you're a family doctor and someone comes into your clinic and they need a medication, but they can't afford it. But because this pharma company gave you boxes of this stuff for free, I mean, you can just say, hey, here you go. Here's a free, 3-month supply. You don't have to pay for it. This actually happened to me. My family doctor thought I needed something, which, turns out I didn't. It was like a proton pump inhibitor, right? Which is like for a GERD, gastric reflux. And he's like, well, I got these like free boxes of this stuff. Here you go. So at least I didn't have to pay for it if I needed it, which I didn't. Anyways, that's a whole other story. But you can see how it can be beneficial in that way. Furthermore, what if the pharma company is like a regional pharma company and it's a big part of the economy? And now because your province or your territory has these sort of rules that prevent this interaction, that pharma company is going to go bankrupt because they can't market, right? For example, Toronto has Sanofi Pasteur, which of course is a French company, but Sanofi Pasteur branch at, I think, Bathurst and Finch, or no, Bathurst and Steeles. So that's in Toronto, right? So imagine now they got to lay off everybody and it affects their families. So anyways, I'm not saying you have to agree with that point of view, but if you can acknowledge at least the perspectives of the evil people in the scenario, it will really make your answer stand out in terms of its maturity, okay? And in terms of its content as well. So I think that makes sense. I'm pretty sure that makes sense. And again, avoid politics. Get your typing speed up. So as Alexandre mentioned, as many people will tell you, listen, we're not here to make you feel fuzzy and warm, okay? Get your typing speed up. You want to hit at least 60, 70 words per minute. Because you might have the best ideas in the world, but if I can simply write down more ideas than you and explain my line of reasoning, right? Maybe you only have the time to write your ideas down, but I have the time now to explain, oh, why would I do this? So this is good because it promotes this and that. Well, I mean, it's about standing out, right? So you don't want to risk it. This is a free website, 10fastfingers.com, that I use to practice. And our website, thebrightdoc.com, will also tell you how many words per minute you wrote, how many sentences you wrote, how many words you wrote. I mean, it'll time you as well. Turn on closed captions. This is a top tier tip that I think no one knows about, or at least no one knew about it until last year when we actually made a TikTok that publicized this. If you turn on the closed captions, you can see people's names, which is very valuable because a lot of times you forget people's names or they say you didn't hear it. And then instead of, saying, okay, the lady in the blue jacket, the man in the, with the trench coat, I don't know, or just saying like the manager or the district manager, you can just say Jessica. You can just say Mike. You can just say someone's name, which is actually a more personable way of speaking and writing using people's names. And furthermore, if you miss something, you can still see the words there. And yeah, you can just read along and it'll help you memorize better. Say your first sentence with confidence. So in those 6 video scenarios, you have 10 seconds to read the question, those sub questions. And in those 10 seconds, near the end, I would rehearse the first few words that will come out of my mouth. So when the camera turned on, most people are like, it's like the first time they're looking at themselves in their lives on a computer. They look shocked. I mean, they stumble over their words. The thing is, I practice the first few words that are going to come out of my mouth during those 10 seconds. So when the camera turns on, it's actually the second time that I'm saying it. And if I mess up the first time, then I can correct it when it counts. So I always have a strong first impression. All right, a very, very strong first impression. And then, in the middle of my spoken answer, I say some coherent stuff, right? Because I'm an ethical guy. And at the end, I have my takeaways. If you remember way back in the presentation, those takeaways, I'd have a takeaway. So imagine I say some very, very strong first impression, and then I have a very strong closing statement. I mean, I'm already standing out. Just say something normal in the middle, and you're going to stand out. Okay. On the blank piece of paper that you're allowed to have, every time there was a video scenario, the second I see a new person's name, I just write it down and then I write small bullet points about them. So this is how I organize my thoughts. Yeah. And then during the 30 seconds you have to think, I'd start making connections and anticipating what you're going to be asked, which is usually, okay, what are you going to do in the scenario, right? Yeah. So take notes during the videos, but don't lose focus. Don't be a detective. And this is a top tier tip. There's a well-known Casper scenario that's something along the lines of you're a cashier at a toy store, and then someone walks in with a toy and they say, hey, I want to return this, but I don't have a receipt. And then they're like, oh, I need to return this because my son or my daughter's sick and I need to pay for their medical care. Right? Please take it back. I know I don't have a receipt. Who's heard of this? Can someone in the either raise their hand or yeah, so a lot of people have heard of this. Again, I don't know where this comes from, but it's a very popular scenario. And I know many people who, because we don't live in a perfect world, they'll start off being like, okay, well, how do I know this person's online, right? How do I know they even have a son or daughter? How do I even know, well, maybe they didn't buy it from here, right? Maybe I'll have to check the cameras to see if they bought it from here. What if they're lying to me? What if, this, and that? And they start becoming a detective. Now, here's the thing, that's not going to get you anywhere on this test. Do not be a detective. The thing is, policies are there for a reason, right? The receipt policy is there for a reason. It's so you can just not be a detective and focus on those core competencies like showing empathy, looking for problem solving. Okay, maybe we can swipe their credit card and see if the transaction comes up. Maybe I can talk to the manager. Maybe I can refer them to some sort of charity or some sort of other resources. You can start being empathetic and looking, giving people the benefit of the doubt, looking at them in a positive light, and going from that angle instead of being a detective. All right, so this makes sense. Don't be a detective. It won't serve you well. All right, so studying the evenings. When I was a teenager, I read this book, which basically said whatever you do 45 minutes before you go to bed gets replayed in your head up to, I think it said up to 6 times more than anything else you do during the day. I don't know how accurate that number is, but I believe it because, if you watch a horror movie in the morning, are you really going to have bad sleep? Maybe, but if you watch it right before you go to sleep, all right, it's going to affect you. So it's the same thing. I would practice 60 to 90 minutes before I went to bed every single night leading up to the Casper. So that's also why you can say we hold our discussions, our webinars at night. So you can go to bed right after and remember this. It's kind of like cramming the night before a test. Yeah, reconvene with friends. So after looking at, those expert answers, I'd also talk to my friends, on the brightdoctor.com. Let me show you. Let's do like a practice test. You can do full length test, half length test. Maybe, you only have 30 minutes. You want to practice your video answers. You want to practice your typed answers or whatnot. You can just do like 3 of them. So yeah, let's just click a full length. I'm not going to obviously make you sit through it, but okay, begin. So on the brightdoctor.com, we have scenarios, acted out scenarios.
The conference, you're good to drive?
Yeah.
These are the 6 video-based.
Last
It
night was
mimics the exact
crazy.
format,
Fun,
the
right?
exact format, and the exact timing of the Casper examination. I'm just going to proceed through it. Obviously, you can't proceed on the real test. You're going to have to sit down, and there's going to be video answers where you're going to record yourself, finish, and I'm just going to skip out of there. If you go to past tests and click review, you will be able to review the video and then see all of these expert model answers, the ideas to go beyond, red flags to avoid, again, with those frameworks, if you so wish, to look at it in this manner. It's a little colorful. Yep, so we have this, and the beauty is we save your video answers so you can go back and download them and share them with your friends. Okay, so that's another benefit. So, okay, reconvene with friends. Yes, okay. And yeah, I would get those like recordings and just share them with your friends. You know what I mean? Like, just like have your friend look at them and see, okay, how are you talking? Are you talking well? Talking not well? Whatever. All right, have start stories ready. So for all of these competencies, these are from the AMC, but you could look at the Caspers as well. I like this list. Have 2 to 3 stories per competency. And again, as you practice questions, you're going to notice which stories you lack. Because what if you're asked something like, name a time you disagreed with the supervisor? And it's like, whoa, it's a crazy question. Well, you don't want it to be the first time you're thinking of a scenario, or worse yet, making it up on the spot on your test day. And practice, practice, practice with model answers because you learn something from every answer. And again, that's what our question banks are for. 100+ scenarios with 3 questions per scenario, so over 300 questions worth of material. And yeah, we did the demo. And we'll be giving you a credit for use of our website. So we recently had a price increase, but the credit will actually bring the price back down to before we increased our prices. Okay, and we're going to send you the credit with the slides. And now let's get to some questions, y'all. Let's have fun. I'll take questions for, by the way, if you want the video recording, you need to be registered on thebrightdoctor.com and it will be under past webinars. Okay, so please register for thebrightdoctor.com and you will see it here, hopefully by tonight, if not by tomorrow afternoon, like noon at latest, you will see the recording. Okay. So, okay. Let's see what questions we have. How would you approach a question during the test? What are the steps before structuring your answer? So Alexandra, I mean, the whole presentation was supposed to answer that. If you have a more specific question, let me know. How do you know if you had a high 4th quartile score? Oh yeah, that's a fun question. Okay, so for McMaster to get an interview, they look at, for the medical school actually, they look at your Casper score, a third, your GPA, a third, and your MCAT reading score, the CARS, a third. Not exactly a third because they allot, I think, 1% to if you have a master's and 4% if you have a PhD. And if you are bad in one section, you need to be perfect basically in the other two. So my GPA was perfect, a 4.0, and my MCAT reading score was weak. Okay, it was a 127, which obviously it's 82nd or I don't know, 70th percentile. I don't know. It's obviously not a bad score, 127 on your CARS, but if you go on Reddit, you know, when the interviews come out, they'll be like, oh, I had this array of scores and I didn't get an interview, or I did get an interview. So because of my weak reading score, but I had a perfect GPA, that means my Casper needed to be very high to make up for the weak reading score. And I would go on Reddit and people said, okay, I got 127, like me on the CARS, but they got 4.0 GPA just like me, or like 3.99, and they had 4th quartile Casper, and they didn't get an interview. They did not. So I had the same, which means my 4th quartile had to be a better 4th quartile. Because then there were people that said I had a 128. I had a 129 and a 4th quartile Casper. Actually, I don't know if I saw 129, but I saw 128. I had 128, 4.0 GPA, and a 4th quartile Casper, and I didn't get an interview. But because I did, and I got accepted to McMaster actually later, that means my 4th quartile must have been like a very high 4th quartile to beat out the effect of my CARS score. I hope, does that make sense? I hope that makes sense, y'all. Just one person, raise your hand. That made sense. Raise your hand if that made sense. Okay, that made sense. There you go. All right, so Lena asks, just to make sure the video questions answers do not. By the way, y'all, the reason we give you all these elaborate explanations, we don't sell consulting. There are companies that will charge you 300, 400 bucks an hour for consulting, okay? We don't do that. That's why we're very comfortable just telling you everything we do. Am I cooked with the 125 CARS? Do you have a master's degree or no? Or a PhD? 120, I mean, you need a very, very high Casper. That's the thing. You have 2 weeks to study for this. Grind it out. You've worked for 4 years. You worked for 4 years. Why do some people get lazy on the Casper? I don't know. Because it matters a lot for like Ottawa or McMaster or McGill if you're out of province, right? Okay. I should probably look at these questions in order. Okay. I'm just going to pick. Okay, I'm going to start at 8 p.m. What's a good word per minute to aim for? 65. Yeah, okay. We addressed this, right? Yeah, aim for at least 60. What's your words per minute? Okay, let me just go to 8:10 p.m. then. I'm in Central Time, so 9:10 for you guys. Did you take notes when the videos were played? Yeah, I did. Like you saw those bullet points. Do Rama or Alexandre offer tutoring? I don't believe so. We do have tutors on our website that charge like 30, 40, 50 bucks an hour. It's on our consulting marketplace right here. Y'all can check that out too. But let's no, Rama and Alexandre are not on the website right now. How long do you have to write for each question? I mean, you could go do a practice test and you'll see it very quickly, but it's 5 minutes for your written ones and, you know, between 3 and then 1 minute for each video answer. If you make typos, okay, so typos, guys, obviously I had typos in my answers, obviously. Don't do bullet points, okay? Like some people, oh, I did bullet points, I did fine. Listen, if people are writing in complete sentences and paragraphs and using semicolons, people are using semicolons, okay? Professional grammar, and you're out here using bullet points. Like, what are you doing? The thing is, it's a test about standing out. So you want to, where you can, you know, you want people to have a good impression of your writing when they're looking at it. So minimize typos where possible. If I saw a typo that I recognized, I'd try to fix it if it wasn't like some huge word or some weird word. All right, let's have pencil paper in the room. Yeah, okay. I like how people are answering other people. This is very helpful. How long do you recommend? Yeah, so I mean, the last Casper is what, October 17th or 14th? Every night, just be doing it every night, like 60 to 90 minutes every night. Try it. If it's the weekend and you have like, I don't know, do 90 minutes in the morning, 90 minutes in the afternoon, 90 minutes at night, just spread it out. It's worth a lot for some schools, and you know, you have 2 weeks to do it. So yeah, this is not the time to be lazy. How do you turn on live captions? I swear there's a button, right? There's a button. It's like CC, you click it. You have to click it. It doesn't automatically do it. There's no Chrome setting for it. Will you be hosting any more sessions like this one? I mean, if you just sign up for the Bright Doctor, you'll see the recording. Charlotte, I noticed in some of the standout scenario answers you gave, they didn't acknowledge different perspectives. So, I mean, that's one of the things, right? It's the 5 ways to go beyond. You can either sit down and think of all the different perspectives, or you can, you know, find other ways, be personable, mention personal experience. It's about giving a mature answer that addresses the core thing and then looking for ways to stand out. No one answer will have all the 5 ways to stand out. How long did I prep? A few weeks, 3 weeks. The first time around, and then the second time around, and then the third time around as well. Is the practice test a part of the 100 practice problems on the website? Yeah, I don't even know what that means. I have no clue what that means. I think you're asking, do you tap into the 100 scenarios as part of the free ones? That's yes. Okay, y'all. I think I've answered these questions. How long do we have to do the Casper test? 90 minutes. So y'all, this is you should know that, and you can use you know, practice tests to get familiar with it. Okay, everybody. Okay, one last question. If you've already answered the next question with your previous response, should you retype it? And the answer to that is, I would skim the 3, or actually I just skim the first and second usually, but if I could just skim the 3 questions first when you're in those typed ones, so you know where to distribute your thinking. Because a lot of times I would have wrote something in the first one, and it's like the second question basically asked me something I wrote about before, and you can't, I don't think you can Control C, Control V, like copy paste or Command X. If you do Command X or Control X, which is like cut, you might just lose your work. Okay, so don't be copy pasting around here. Just quickly skim them so you know what to do. And with that, oh, if you take the Casper twice, do they take your best score? No. It's just a different score for every cycle and a different score for every different program or country. All right, guys. And a program meaning like Medicine Canada, Medicine US. All your schools get the same score in that cycle in the same country for the same specialty, like medicine or dentistry. With that, I wish everyone the very, very best of luck on their Casper examinations. Thank you again for spending your Friday evening with us. I mean, again, if I were you, I'd be partying right now. I really would. So maybe, I don't know, maybe have a party after this to attend, right? It's just what? It's 10 p.m., 9:30 p.m. Maybe you can go to the bar. I don't know. Anyways, have a very good night and all the best. Again, you have our email if you have any questions, further questions, and you can look forward to the slides being sent to you very, very soon.